Hi, and welcome to the Cloud Curious Challenge. I'm Saf.
And I'm Jake, and we're both cloud engineers with KPMG. Saf and myself spend all day building and maintaining client solutions within the cloud, but we often get asked the question, what is the cloud? Hopefully, we'll be able to help answer that question for everybody watching today, and we're also hoping that together we can beat a Guinness World Record. The record we are attempting today is for the world's largest online cloud computer lesson. In order for you to be counted as part of this Guinness World Record and to be able to say that you are a record breaker yourself, all you need to do is watch this video between 12 p.m. noon on the 17th of November and 12 p.m. noon on the 18th. So what do YouTube, Spotify, and Pokemon Go all have in common? Well, they all use the cloud. Now, the cloud is a general catch-all term that people will use to describe the ability to consume and use online IT infrastructure. Before we get into more details of an explanation of what the cloud is and how you might use it, we're just going to take a brief look at the history of computing to understand where the cloud originated from. Now, the history of computing goes back a lot longer than most people may expect. As early as the 1820s, Charles Babbage created the first mechanical calculator called the difference engine, and this landed him with the epithet of the inventor of the computer. Mechanical computing devices were then continuously used all the way through until the 1940s, where during the Second World War, code breakers were using these giant mechanical computers in order to break the encryption of important wartime communications. At this time, however, the computers were still incredibly large mechanical devices that filled entire floors of buildings. After the Second World War, when these researchers and code breakers left the war effort and returned to everyday life, they continued to develop the technology that was used during the war and created the electronic computers. It was then during the 1960s that the US government created what is known as ARPANET, which was the forerunner to the modern internet as we know it today. This allowed the mainframe computers across the US to connect up to each other and send communications. It was also during this time that technology advanced and everything managed to shrink in size. This allowed these giant mainframe computers to get smaller and smaller until in the early 70s, it was possible to now have a computer on every single person's desk. During the 1980s, companies started to see the benefits that IT brought to their business and started to build out their own on-premise data centers to meet their demand. These data centers often consisted of anywhere between 10 and 100 individual computers that were used as their servers. At the end of the 1980s, Tim Berners-Lee launched the first version of the World Wide Web. Within a few years of this occurring, there were millions of home users connected to the internet through services such as AOL and FreeServe. Where the consumers went, businesses were soon to follow, and this led to the Dotcom Bubble taking root in the late 1990s. As part of this, any company that had a .com website was overnight valued as being worth millions and millions of dollars. Unfortunately, this bubble burst in the early 2000s, and then thankfully this paved the way for Web 2.0. Web 2.0 is primarily seen as the birth of social media, and companies such as MySpace, Facebook, Twitter all started during this period. Social media and Web 2.0 websites became so popular that millions and millions of users were visiting them that they were unable to use the traditional model of on-premise data centers to power the services that they required. It was from this then that Amazon Web Services launched their first public cloud service in 2006. So what exactly is the cloud, Saf?
So the cloud is on-demand availability of computer resources where you, the user, don't have to manage them because the cloud providers do. So you can rent only what you need for as long as you use it. So think about it like an Uber. Instead of having to pay for the car, the petrol, the insurance, you only pay for your journey. So there are a lot of companies that power the cloud, but the main three providers are Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. The services the cloud offer can be broadly broken down to several different areas. There's compute, which is processing data, storage, which lets you store massive amounts of data, database, which is another way to store your data, but in a more structured way, machine learning, which lets you perform artificial intelligence on your data, and analytics, which lets you find and visualize trends in your data. So what does the cloud look like? Well, the cloud is actually a physical thing. So think of a data center as a factory, but instead of workers, it's full of computers. The cloud is made up of thousands of these data centers and millions of computers all around the world. So when you use the cloud, it's these resources you're consuming. There are three types of cloud computing. There's infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, platform as a service, or PaaS, and software as a service, or SaaS. And to go into these a little bit more, we'll look at cloud computing as a pizza. So like Jake mentioned, before cloud computing, there was on-premise, and that is where you had to manage everything. So think of this as your pizza you're making at home. You have to make sure you have all the toppings, all the ingredients, and all the ways to cook and eat it. The first type of cloud computing is infrastructure as a service, where there's a shared responsibility between you and the cloud. Think about this as your take and bake pizza. This is your pizza you take from the supermarket, it's all ready to go, but you still have to bring it home and cook it, get your drinks, and have your dining experience. Then there's platform as a service, where you only have to manage a small amount of things. So think of this as your pizza delivery. So the pizza comes hot and ready to eat, and you only have to manage your dining and your drinks. And lastly, there's software as a service, where absolutely everything is looked after for you. And think about this as dining out at your favourite pizza restaurant. All you have to do is turn up and everything is done for you. So where is the cloud used? Well, you might not be surprised to know that big tech companies such as Apple and Google are using the cloud, as well as streaming services like BBC iPlayer and Netflix, and even online shopping like ASOS and Boohoo, as well as your online banking. And every time you play a game online, you'll also be utilising the cloud. You might be more surprised to know that your local restaurants are using the cloud every time they accept an online order from Just Eat or Deliveroo, as well as your utilities and governments when creating their applications. So have you used the cloud today? Well, let's have a think. Have you backed up your phone, used any online banking, or done any online shopping? Have you been sending Snapchats to your friends or uploading photos to Instagram, listening to music on Spotify, or watching your favourite show on Netflix? Have you played any games over the internet? If you have, these are all backed by the cloud. But if you've not done any of those things today, just by watching this video and taking part in this Guinness World Record attempt, you have used the public cloud. So what happens when you watch this video? So you click the link to watch this video, and the request goes from your device to your wireless router. Your wireless router sends that signal through to your broadband provider, and your broadband provider sends this out, the cloud picks it up, goes to YouTube, and gets the video for you before bringing it back. So how else could you use the cloud, Jake?
Well, it's not all about streaming video or music. You can also use the cloud to build and maintain your websites. You can use it to run many different types of businesses, and you can also use it to grow to a very large scale. So imagine having to process millions of orders, upload millions of photos, or even, say, add subtitles to every single Netflix show. But why should you actually use the cloud? Well, one of the first key reasons that people use it is it allows them to do things incredibly quickly. You no longer have to build those data centers and set up that equipment yourself. As Saf described earlier, this is now the responsibility of the cloud provider rather than yourself. This also then allows you to only focus on the things that you are actually good at. You no longer have to manage the computer hardware yourself. You only deal with the stuff that you actually care and are good at. It's also a lot cheaper to start and run services in the cloud. With a traditional on-premise data center, you used to have to spend thousands and thousands of pounds up front in order to, first of all, build the data center and then fill it with incredibly expensive computer hardware. However, with the cloud, you can use a pay-as-you-go model, and you only ever pay for the services that you consume. It's also very, very good at scaling to massive, massive loads. With on-premise data centers, you used to have to plan the size of your equipment years and years in advance. However, with the cloud, you have the ability to instantly grow so that your service can handle either one user or 1 million users, and you can scale this immediately, almost overnight. It's also already global. With an on-premise data center, you used to have to build multiple data centers across the world if you wanted to have local computing resources. However, with the cloud, they've already taken care of building all of these resources for you, so you're able to go global at the click of a button. So now let's have a quick look to see how the cloud managed to save the launch of the popular video game Pokemon Go. In early 2016, as the developers were getting ready to launch the Pokemon Go game, they had an expectation that around 20 to 50,000 users would actually be playing the game every single day. However, when the game launched in the few preceding weeks, the number of players actually using the game was in the millions. If the Pokemon Go team had used traditional on-premise data centers, they wouldn't have been able to handle this number of users because they would have had to have already purchased and set up all of the equipment. Since the cloud allowed them to scale globally at a click of a button, the Pokemon Go team actually managed to scale and handle 50 times the amount of game players that they originally estimated. So this has just been a very brief overview of what the cloud is and how different companies and people use it. If you'd like to get a little bit more hands-on, please visit kpmgtechplayground.com, where we have a series of lessons showcasing how you can actually get started with the cloud today. On that website, there are also a ton of other resources if you're interested in learning more about different types of technology.
Congratulations, you have completed the Cloud Curious Challenge. Every person that watches this video will be included in the Guinness World Record attempt. To ensure we break the record, please send and share this video with as many people as possible, and together, using the cloud, we can smash a world record.